Welcome to the Creating High Performance Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Olympian Jonathan Edwards. Let's get started. Hey everybody. All right. Hey everybody. Happy Wednesday. We are live at the athletespecific.com Raising High Performing Athletes podcast. If you're listening on iTunes, if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're on the Facebook Live, welcome. It is a new year. We're 2 weeks into the new year. How's everybody's New Year's resolutions going? Pretty good. Ellis Redford, good to see you. Checking in. Love it. So listen, everybody, very excited about a couple things. So just wanted to say hi, especially I've got some athletes and some parents who are over in St. Moritz right now at the Youth Olympic Games, which is just ridiculously pretty. The weather over there has been phenomenal. So if you want to check it out on Facebook or just Google it, it's just been awesome. Just get on Instagram and follow some sports, and you'll see some just ridiculous photos, which is it's probably my favorite place on the in the world. One of my favorite places in the world. Just beautiful, super posh, super luxurious, and just picture postcard perfect. So good luck to all our athletes over there, which is great. And couple things, couple freebies. I've been kind of creating some free resources for everybody. I've got a new one over at overcomeanychallenge.com. I put together a PDF, a little ebook on perfect day, like how to basically end your day and start your day with a good set of habits to kind of set the tone for your day, no matter what you got going on. So something that I probably didn't do enough of when I was young, but now as I've aged a bit, as we all have, just kind of understanding how the day ends and how the day begins really kind of reduces the friction to get the most things done. And so check that out over overcomeanychallenge.com. Listen, tell your athletes or yourself. You can follow me on Instagram and on TikTok for your young ones on TikTok, and on Snapchat I'm at Olympic Jonathan. So if you want to follow me there, I'm producing content over there as well, which is great. And as always, for a lot of my athletes, I created a new masterclass that you can have access to. It's product, it's paid for, but it's at athletespecific.com/confidence. It's if your athletes are not having confidence, or if you're lacking confidence, you're wondering how confidence works, that's the course. Okay, I've been doing a lot of research there, which is great, a lot of fun, and so I hope you'll check that out. So listen, today I realized I might have talked about this maybe a few months ago now, but it's come up a lot recently with my athletes who are in my coaching program at the Athlete Breakthrough Blueprint. It's going to come to a point where you're dealing with coaches who are difficult, and they may be difficult legitimately. You may perceive them to be difficult. There's a lot of layers to this onion on dealing with difficult coaches. So I wanted to discuss it today. One of the things that I tell my athletes is that your coaches have abilities too, right? So in my book, in An Athlete's Guide to Winning in Sports and Life, that I hope you all have a copy of, it's available on Amazon. It hit number 2 in sports psychology when we launched. Really proud of that book. One of the topics in it was this idea that like every athlete has 3 key abilities to be successful. They have a physical ability, they have a technical ability, and they have a tactical ability, right? Your physical ability is your body's ability to do the thing you want to do. Your technical ability is doing that thing, and your tactical ability is when you do what it is you do, right? So what happens is most coaches in your sport are tactically based first. Like let's say you're a figure skater, and your coach is all about choreography, right? It's we need to do this performance, and then the athlete has to perform these components. Well, that's the technical stuff. The coach will do the tactical first and then go to technical. If technical doesn't work, they get really frustrated and they just wish you were physically better to do the things they want you to do. So, but coaches have those strengths as well, right? So it's important to understand that your coach has a tendency towards some of those abilities and not others, okay? It's rare to have a coach who understands all three, but then on top of the layers, right? On top of the layers, on top of the abilities, we have what I call the three layers, right? So your first layer is resources, right? So time, energy, and money. Like the time, energy, and money you have to put towards your abilities, right? Then you have life skills, right? So your life skills are, a lot of things you probably just think of, like being on time and being organized and controlling your emotions and dealing with adversity. These are all life skills, right? And then finally, your beliefs. Okay, so your beliefs in all of it, your beliefs in your abilities, your beliefs in your resources, and your beliefs in your ability to have life skills as well, right? So what happens though is the further up the food chain you go, okay, in your sport, is the less the coaches want to, the more the coaches want to focus on the tactical ability and the technical, right? They want to make sure your equipment's dialed in and they want you to be able to do this, like you're a skier, you're coming to a certain jump, you need to be here, right? For my sliding athletes, you're going in a curve, you got to be in this point and not that point, or you got to be early and not late, right? You want to be high and not low, like whatever it is. Your coach's main focus is going to be there. It's a bonus if they can deal with the layers, right? Help you with your resources, help you with your life skills, help you with your beliefs in yourself. They really don't want to be there because that's not their main ability. For some coaches, it is. For some coaches, they're more onto the belief and the psychology side and less on the technical side. But for the most part, for the athletes that I work with kind of daily, their main coach is more of a tactical and a technical coach. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is like, okay, it's kind of like receptor sites on cells in your body, right? Like if you've ever seen a graphic of how this works, like let's say you take a pain medicine, and well, that pain medicine dissolves in your stomach, and then it goes out, and it's finding a receptor site. Well, your coach either has receptors or they don't, right? And so it's important to understand, like not every coach is going to be able to give me all of the things I want as an athlete. And that's where a lot of conflict begins, is where an athlete thinks like, oh, I'm not getting this type of support from my coach. My coach is wrong. My coach is bad, and I'm perfect. And then it just creates this massive rift. We don't want that, right? We don't want that. So it's important to understand that sometimes your coach is not emotionally capable of being communicative or empathetic, or they provide feedback, the right type of feedback, right? I believe that for a lot of our athletes, when they're dealing with coaches, and this might sound a little weird to some of you, but what they really want to start is they just want a hug, right? They want to be told they're doing a good job. They want to be told that they're putting in a good effort. Now, that's okay if they are. If they're not, then you're just delusional. But for the most part, an athlete really just wants someone to go, hey, I see the effort you're putting in, and you're doing a good job. This is how you can fix it. That's really what athletes, I think, want at their core. Some athletes, yes. Some athletes, I get it. They're black and white, they're stubborn, that's okay. But for the most part, that's what we're looking like from our coaches. But when you think about it, when programs have difficulty with coaches, it's less about what they're teaching and more about how they're going about it. Okay? So in Canada, or in the NHL, for those of you guys that might be hockey fans, I had an interesting couple months before Christmas. There were some allegations or coaches that got fired, and then athletes came out saying like, yeah, like that guy was a racist, or he kicked me, or this or that or whatever. And I'm not discounting those accusations at all, but I always ask like, well, what was the athlete's part in that situation, right? There was the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs got let go. And and then word came out that there was this athlete who, he said, like, the reason my career ended was because of the mental abuse I got from that coach. And I'm going like, wow, to get to that point, so many other things had to come into play, right? To get that far down that road, right? And so the coach-athlete relationship is a partnership. That's really how I want it to be. But the further you go up on the food chain, the more transactional it is. It's like, what can you do for me, right? As the coach, they're paid to win, right? at every level, they're paid to win. And if they're not winning, then not everybody gets everybody's happy, and then the coach has got to go and a new coach comes in, and if they're not winning, then they go, and so on and so forth. But I want to empower the athlete, and I want to empower the parents of the athlete to bridge the gap, okay? So first, you got to understand that every person that you deal with in life has a communication style, right? We know this in the corporate world. We know this in the educational world. It's common knowledge. But somehow in sport, we forget that, right? We think that, oh, this coach he's got to tick all the boxes for me, or else I'm not happy. And that's not a life lesson I want my athletes to go with. So sometimes coaches are just not emotionally able to give the type of feedback or the type of communication the way your athlete wants it, right? So it's important to just identify that first, okay? You would never ask somebody to do something they weren't necessarily good at, right? You go like, okay, listen, I know you're good at this, but maybe not at that, and so we're going to find somebody else to do that. But that, when it's a coach, that's really kind of hard to go with, right? So here we go. Secondly, your coach may be emulating their coach or maybe their parents and their style, right? I've seen this happen a lot, where the coach knows a certain style and they are a hammer and everybody is a nail. I've got a hockey athlete I'm working with right now where this is the case. The coach is rather old school and is very much like, he's got one way to communicate, and that works if you're doing great. But if you're not doing great, then it's challenging. Let's put it that way, right? So, also, one thing to understand is that your coach may be overworked, overwhelmed, right? A lot of times if you're on a team environment, even if you're an individual athlete in a sport, you're still usually part of a team. And that coach, they've got all these athletes they're dealing with. They got all these plates they're trying to spin, right? And then they come to you, and the way I kind of draw this out is that, if you draw your coach's name on a piece of paper, okay, and then what you do is you put a circle around the coach, like just like a bubble, right? And then you can draw like an X and a Y axis, right? And so you're gonna map in somewhere on that graph, right? Now, if things are going great, you're right in the middle of the coach's bubble, right? The bubble represents the coach's abilities to work with you and deal with you and give you the things that you need. But if your skills are low and your abilities are low and your experience is not good, you're going to fall outside of that coach's bubble. Now, here's what happens. The coach, a good, well-meaning coach, looks at their bubble and wants to expand it to include you, to include the athlete. That's not true of all coaches, right? That's not true of all. Some coaches are fixed. They're like, this is it. This is my bubble, and you're getting what you get, and that's it, right? And that's not great either. But from the athlete's perspective, if things are going great, the coach's bubble is huge, right? This coach can do no wrong. It's amazing. It's all good. Things are happening. But if something goes sideways, right, then the athlete's view or the parent's view of the coach's bubble is like tiny. It's this little tiny circle, right? And that's not fair either, okay? So we want to make sure that when we look at this as a partnership, we want to bridge the gaps where we can. and that's it. It's got to come both ways. Now, I've been around coaches. I know coaches that fit into kind of all different boxes. I've had I've worked last year. I was working with a gymnast who comes from a Eastern European heritage. Very used to Eastern European coaches, and they are just all about, like, there's not a lot of love. There's not a lot of soft and fluffy on Eastern European coaches, right? And this athlete coming up was around nothing but North American coaches, very young, a lot of them like really recent out of being an athlete, North American, different environment. Then this athlete got now to the next level, was with a hard-nosed Eastern European coach. And what was interesting about it was her mom, who had been an athlete in Europe, was all about the hard-nosed coach. But this athlete now had kind of lost that connection, had lost that understanding of, like, that Eastern European coaches coach in a particular way doesn't mean that she's necessarily bad, but how they spoke to her made her feel like she was bad, right? And so it would be great if we could just shut off all emotional filters, or add all sorts of emotional filters, so that our athlete goes, hey, whatever the coach says to me, I just take as black and white and I can move forward. But no, it has color. It gets filtered. Some things are good. Some things feel bad. We don't want that, right? So, but this is where what's happening, everybody. So for all the parents listening to me right now, and the coaches too, we got some coaches on here, which is great, is that what we're getting at is we are needing to help our athletes who are coming up develop adult communication skills, right? And I think many of you would agree that a lot of these skills we didn't learn until we were a lot older, right? I know I didn't, like, when, I didn't understand some of these things. I was able, like, if a coach gave me some hard feedback, I was able to take that and just go. But there's now things are just getting more, the needle's moving really quick, right? Instead of going like, oh, that was a little hard, it's like, oh my God, that coach is an ass, right? And so I'm trying to avoid that, right? So I believe that every coach at their core really wants your athlete to succeed. I really do. Coaches do have favorites, okay? They do have favorites. And when parents come to me and it's like, oh, this coach is horrible, he just likes this other girl or this other guy, that's his favorite. I go, okay, wait a second. What's your athlete doing not to be the favorite? Right? The coach in Toronto who got fired, and then the athlete was like, oh, that guy's evil. He's like the worst person ever. He ruined my career. I'm going like, what were you doing as a professional athlete to get to that point, right? That got the coach to that point about you, all right? And that's something I think we need to address. There's another situation like the Calgary Flames head coach got fired, and a story came out of an athlete who is not in the NHL anymore, but the athlete who was also black. So that now you've got that on top of it. Was like that. Oh, the coach is a racist and this and that. And I'm going like, well, wait a second, what happened to get the coach to that point where he felt like he needed to treat an athlete that way? And there was a story that popped up, and this was kind of interesting, where, okay, so you can imagine that a coach who is Canadian, white, brought up a certain way, is going to probably have certain musical tastes, okay, as opposed to an athlete who's got an African-American heritage. And one of the stories that came out was that this athlete was playing like really loud, like rap music in the locker room. Well, can you imagine like what that, we'd like to say like, oh, well, the coach shouldn't care. It's the athlete's locker room. The coach shouldn't care. Well, I disagree. Like, everybody's got to live in a certain environment. And what I think was missed there is like, okay, first and foremost, like, did the athletes know that the coach didn't like that music, right? Did the athletes know that by playing the music like extra loud, you're probably going to make the coach upset. Now, if the coach is already upset at you And then now this happens. This is one more thing that's just adding layers on and layers. And people say like, oh, well, it should be professional. And you're like, no, wait a second. It all that. To me, the respect goes both ways. So I'm just using that as one small example. Now, what could the coach have done better in that situation? Maybe set some rules. Is like, okay, if you're going to play music in the locker room, it's got to be this. It's got to fit in this category. All right. I tell my kids this, there's millions of songs to pick from. It doesn't have to be that song, and music is a big, powerful, it's a powerful emotional driver. So it's something to be considered. Now, what the athletes could have done is gone like, all right, listen, we respect our coach. He's working hard for us, and I'm going to respect him back by let's pick something that maybe he likes too. Or maybe it meets halfway, right? Coach goes, it's not that bad. But if it's like, something that just kind of like, turns the screws a little bit, well, that's not cool, right? Nobody likes that going either way. So why? So I believe that one thing that coaches love is that coaches love an athlete who, even though they might not be the best ability-wise, they're putting in effort. But also on top of the effort, they're asking questions. They're curious. They're showing signs that they want to get better. When a distance kind of happens between the coach and the athlete, then tension starts to rise. And so I had this situation recently with one of my Blueprint athletes where, the coach lacked a communication style that fit the athlete, and the athlete wasn't aware that this was the problem, right? So the athlete took it that the coach hated him. The coach took it that the athlete didn't care, because the athlete had gone to him once and asked a question and was met with a really kind of strong response, and the athlete's personality just made him shut down and leave. It's like, touching a hot pot, right? Like, I'm not going to do that again, right? And the coach was very much a hammer, right? And so that is not a personality that's going to reach out, right? But this coach also has like 25 other athletes to deal with, and he's got a team to run and a business to run, and he's got so this is one more thing. And yeah, we'd all like to think that the athlete's needs are like top on the list, but as you go further up the food chain, you're dealing with your coach is usually not just dealing with the warm and fuzzies. They're dealing with like, okay, how are we going to put our man up together and score against Vancouver? Or, how are we going to get better training? Or how are we going to travel here? Or how are we going to, like, the last thing they're thinking of is like turn around and giving your athlete a hug. And what that is really, it's being present, right? That's really what you want from your coach is when you go to them, is you go to them and you say, you ask a question, the athlete is looking for feedback. When the athlete doesn't get the feedback that they need, okay, and in the package, this is where it falls apart. When the athlete goes to a coach and they're looking for feedback, if they don't get it in the package that they want it in, a young athlete lacks the maturity to basically translate what's been told, and to be able to go forward. All right, that's usually where this falls apart. Is athletes always need feedback. Now, as long as the feedback is accurate, so I'll give you an example. The athlete has to, and the athlete and the parents have to come looking for feedback, right? And be of sane mind. Okay, I was just talking to my other podcast about that. Remember that movie Shallow Hal with Jack Black, and I think it was who was it? Gwyneth Paltrow, I think. And so he sees Gwyneth Paltrow like she's like this goddess, but in reality she's like overweight, not very attractive. Some athletes some parents look at their athlete like that. Like that they're this, this model, good looks, blonde bombshell, but really, they look like Jack Black, right? So so as long as that thinking is clear, and you go to the coach and you get accurate feedback, right? Because I was working with an athlete this last year where the athlete was so far down this road where they thought the coach hated them, that basically everything the coach said felt like a slight, a dig, like an attack on their heritage and their grandparents and their, like, you name it. Like, and what I had to do with that athlete was get them to understand that the feedback that they were getting was in fact valid. And that can sometimes be a tough pill to swallow, right? And so athletes, it's very hard to remove the emotional filter, but the best athletes do. And the best athletes can look at themselves almost more critically than their coach does. So that by the time they go to their coach, the coach naturally feels like this, this warm hug, right? Because their inner voice, the one that's beating themselves up, is being really hard on them, and the coach is almost a step down. But it's when the reverse happens, then the setup with the coach, it's really not. It's not a successful situation, right? So if your athlete is coming to the coach, right, and I want to back up here, and I want to reiterate this idea that the athlete-coach relationship is a partnership. It's a business relationships, right? The athlete wants to do better. The coach wants the athlete to do better. What can we do with the resources that we have between us to move you ahead? Okay. Now, one of the problems that comes into play is when the athlete is not aware that a coach has a certain communication style, right? And this is where one of the problems we're having in sports, everybody's on edge. Coaches are on edge, parents are on edge, athletes are on edge. They're caught in the middle, and referees are on edge. Everybody's on edge, and what everybody wishes is that everybody will just stay in their own little silo and it'll all be good. And I think that's the biggest problem right now that we see in sort of kind of athlete coach dynamics. And the reason why is that most coaches, whether they are adults or they're young coaches and they don't have a lot of experience, is that they lack communication ability, okay? Or they have one type of ability or maybe a limited ability. And then you take a young athlete who really has no awareness about communication style, right? What needs to happen here is that, so a lot of people say, like, okay, parents should stay out of it. Like, let your athlete deal with everything, right? Parents should just stay out of it. And I don't agree with that. And this is the example I give, okay? Let's say your family needs a new car, okay? So mom, dad, the car you've got, you need a new one, okay? So would you send your athlete to go negotiate a car deal for your family with no knowledge or no experience doing that sort of thing? The answer is no, right? Now, take it a step further, right? We all know, like, okay, the smart thing to do is you don't buy a new car, you buy a used car. Like, let's say you're going to go get a Lexus. You're not going to buy a new Lexus because it's going to depreciate like $30,000 in a year. Who the hell is going to do that? So you go buy a used car, right? So now you're going to send your athlete to go negotiate a deal with that used car salesman. Now, I'm not saying that coaches are used car salesmen, but some are, right? Some, they'll sell you a bill of goods and then holy smokes, right? Like, this isn't, so now the kid is left to go like, okay, I'm now communicating with an adult, and now the athlete is also in this respect position. Now, here's the deal. I brought this off my shelf. I'm holding up a copy of a really heavy book called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. It's at every Chapters Indigo, Barnes & Noble, get on Amazon, whatever. This book should be mandatory reading for everybody, not just athletes, okay? My point is this. Your key to your athlete's success is the coach they are working with right now. You may wish that they had another coach, right? You may wish or may think that the grass is greener with another coach, another team, another country, like whatever. But the common thing between you, your athlete, and all those other teams and programs and coaches is your athlete. So if their skills don't change, you're going to run into the same problems elsewhere. I guarantee it. Because again, the further up the food chain you go, right? You go from junior national to national, or you go from development to junior national. You go from JV to varsity. You go from high school hockey to junior hockey. You go to junior hockey to WHL hockey, right? You go pro. Like, it doesn't matter. The further you go up the food chain, your coaches are going to have less of those skills you hope your coach has, but they're going to have less bandwidth to give it to you. So your athlete has to come with some skills, and you as the parent need to get your athlete ready to deal with those skills, right? I'll say this, the most problems with athletes and coaches come when the athlete is just not cutting it, right? And sometimes, and I've got a parent on here right now who's going to totally resonate with this and know why I'm talking about it. Sometimes your athlete is performing well, but for some reason, the coach just isn't giving them the time they deserve, the respect you may feel they deserve, okay? But wouldn't the answer be, like, if your athlete was the best right now in that coach's team in those eyes, that there wouldn't be a problem? And the answer is usually a hard yes. So now here's what happens. Now we've got to go back to the athlete and look critically and go, oh, listen, do you understand why your coach is communicating with you or not communicating with you? Do you understand that? Do you understand the coach's communication style? Do you understand maybe how you can bridge that gap, right? What are you doing that you could do better, right? What are you doing? What part of your game, right? Physical, technical, tactical. What needs to improve, okay? Once you come up with that list of things, then now we've got something to work towards. Now, if your coach lacks communication skills and they're not the one to turn around and say, hey, you're doing a good job, this, that, you've just got to have some belief, some faith that the things you're working on are going to make this better. I remember being on the U.S. national team, had just come off our best season ever. And we had high hopes for the Olympics. Like, this is it. We're going to medal. Like, this is going to be awesome. And in the fall, we had our worst, races. In one race, we were going backwards. And it got to the point where it was just, confusion. Like, as athletes, we didn't know what was, we didn't really know what wasn't working. And one day, our coach, Wolfie, he said, listen, he goes, when you drive your car down the highway and, you're just driving, but then all of a sudden there's a cop in your rearview mirror and all of a sudden you tighten up, right? And everything's all tight and you're just like, I'm in between all the lines. I'm doing everything right. Our coaches said, listen, you've got to forget that cop's behind you and just drive. Because the odds are you're still going to do the right things. You still know how to do your sport. You still know how to be a good athlete. And you know when you're doing things wrong, right? Jeff Shire, Ugh Segulda, yes, going backwards. Every athlete, every parent knows that what the athlete could be doing to be better, right? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they eating right? Are they taking notes? Are they taking care of their equipment? Are they watching video? Are they or are they just caught up in the day-to-day and just stuff slipping, right? So I'll tell you, all that stuff helps your communication, your results, which then helps your relationship with your athlete or with your coach. But here's the thing, is that all the parents who are listening right now, one of the best ways to avoid this situation completely is you get to know your coach before things go sideways. Okay? Now, it would be great if coaches gave every parent and athlete an opportunity to sit down for 2 hours at the beginning of the season so they could get to know each other and find out what your favorite ice cream flavor is and all that. But there's rarely time, okay? I remember the first time getting shipped from Germany to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to go from junior world championships to senior world championships. Barely knew the coaches, barely knew the other athletes, but we had to race in 4 days. There's no time to sit down and go, hey, how are you doing today? Right? But if we never prepare our athletes for those moments, we're just setting them up for failure, right? As good and talented as they may be, they get to a point and they finally get that next level and those coach, and there's no relationship there. And you know what, guys? That's okay. There doesn't need to be. This is that level of professionalism that we talk about at young ages, and we say oh, the professionalism in youth sports is ruining youth sports. No. What's ruining athletes as they progress is they get to a point where all of a sudden they quit because they can't communicate effectively with their coaching staff. Okay? And that's where we talk about physical ability, technical ability, tactical ability. What I talk about with the athletes when they finally get to me is psychological flexibility, right? Is all right, how are we going to dodge this one? How are we going to work this one? Okay, there's an opening there with the coach. What can we do? What can we do to bridge that gap? Because I want to be friends enough with my coach so that when things go sideways, I'm still around, right? I'm not getting cut, I'm not leaving going oh, the coach was an ass. I quit hockey. It ruined me for the rest of my life, which is what we heard with Franson when he was playing for Detroit with Coach Babcock. So if you guys want to Google that, you can find it, right? But listen. You're listening to me right now, whether it's live or it's in your car or you're sharing this with somebody, is that I believe every coach, especially if they've been in their sport for a while, if this is their thing, I believe that every coach wants your kid to succeed, right? Yes, there are coaches out there that like to use negative coaching styles to drive you. I do believe that that's the lowest of the low, right? The last technique a coach should ever go to motivate your kid, it actually comes from a really bad parenting technique, which is if you don't do what I'm asking you, I'm going to take it away from you, right? If you don't do better, I'm going to cut you, right? Or if you don't do better, you're done. That's the lowest, that's the last level. And you have to take some responsibility as an athlete and then also the parent of that athlete to go how the hell did we get here? Right? How do we get to this point? Right? And what can we do to either improve it? But the best way to improve it is to come in with a little bit of better dynamics. Now, in some sports, I've got athletes who are in some sports. A lot of my hockey guys, I've worked with a number of hockey guys this year, and it's been interesting. As a kid who grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, playing hockey at a prep school, the path to the pros was prep school hockey or high school hockey, college, or college university, and then pro. Right, that was it. But in Canada, it's holy smokes, you be on this team or that team, and you get traded. Well, traded, you get the rug pulled out from under you. And I got an athlete right now that we're dealing with that. Right? He's doing really well. Rug gets pulled out from you. What the hell's that? Right? That's when you have to realize you have to have faith in your ability. So as the parents who are watching me now, your athlete is going to get to a certain point and you know that they're good and that they show all the signs and parts and pieces to move forward. And you know what? You may have a coach along the way who comes in and goes, nah, I don't think so. And you've got to work around that. I had that in my own career, both in the sport of luge and the sport of lacrosse, where I had coaches, that were negative to me, but I had to believe in myself. And you have to believe in yourself and your athlete and go, okay, listen, is he really speaking the truth? Right? Because the greatest question you can ask a coach, if they come at your athlete negatively, right, and you could teach this to your kids if they're up with a coach and the coach is coming at them kind of harshly or negatively, or derogatorily, right? Is to say, Coach, what makes you say that? It's a very disarming question. It's like, Coach, what makes you say that? Right? If Coach comes to your athlete and says, I don't think you're ever going to be an Olympic athlete. Coach, what makes you say that? Now it forces the coach to shift into a different gear. Now we're getting feedback. Now we're getting feedback we can operate with. So I'm going to share with you a story. And so I'm at the Cornell lacrosse camp. I'm like, grade 10, 11. And I'm in luge, and I'm all in on luge, and I've got Olympic dreams, but I've also have dreams. I want to be a Division I athlete. I want to be a Division I lacrosse player. I'm going to be a Division I goalie, and I'm playing at a small school in New England, right, which didn't mean much back then. And I got this coach who's like this bigwig lacrosse goalie coach from Long Island, right? Hotbed of lacrosse. His name's Bob Rule. The name like Rule, you know where this is going, right? And so I had gotten really strong from training for luge that I could use a shorter lacrosse stick, a goalie stick, which was really rare at the time. And this coach was like, he comes up to me and he just didn't like anything about me. Didn't like how I looked. Didn't like the short stick, nothing. He's like, Coach, where are you from? Or he's like, Kid, where are you from? I'm like, I'm Massachusetts. And he goes, no goalie from Massachusetts ever makes it. And I was like, what? Right? Like, how do you tell it to a kid? But there's coaches out there who do, right? So I was not warned about this. Somehow I managed to make it. But I'm telling you, you got to warn your kids that they're going to run into coaches like this, right? So the coach says, like, well, first of all, you're out of Massachusetts, and no kids out of Massachusetts make it to play Division I. And he said, he'd asked me, like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a Division I lacrosse goalie. And I said, and he goes, well, that's not going to happen. And I was like, wait, there's kids that have gone on Division I from Massachusetts. So I knew that this guy was basically an ass at that point, right? And then he goes, well, you need a longer stick to cut down passes. And I'm like, Coach, what makes you say that? Well, goalies need to be able to cut down passes. I'm like, Coach, I thought goalies are here to stop the ball first. And I had seen a video that he had done where he had said that, right? So I knew that he was just kind of busting my balls a little bit, or he was just an ass. The last thing he said was like, well, with a short stick, you can't make passes long enough. And there was a ball at my feet. There was a lot of balls at my feet. So I grabbed the ball, and at this point, I was kind of pissed off. And so I took the ball, and I hucked it over the opposite goal. Like, that's like 80 yards or something. And he walked away. The reason I share that story is that your athlete needs to have a level of confidence as they go along in their belief in themselves. They're like, I'm a good athlete at this. I'm a good hockey player, a skier, a skater, whatever. I'm good. I get it. I know in my soul that I'm good at what I do. And this coach that is in front of me right now is talking to me in a way that is not meshing with me right now. So when you go to the coach and you say, listen, Coach, why do you say that? Well, right then, that coach that walked away from me, that was an opportunity for him to give me more feedback and to go, wow, but I did it in a confrontational manner. You can't do that. You've got to come to your coach. You got to meet your coach before things go sideways. So as soon as you know you're going to be with a coach, having some sort of communication with the athlete and the parents, whether that's together or separate, I don't know any coach that would not respect a mom, a dad, parents that came to them going like, hey, listen, we're excited to work with you, right? And asking questions like, how can we best work with you, right? Can we ask you questions? Like, can we talk to you? How can we best work with you so that we get the best out of this relationship, right? If you come and coach, coaches know there's certain parents who are helicopter parents, and those are typically the ones who don't come to the coach. They're the ones who come in later, right? And they're like, arr. No, if you come in as a partner, this is a different deal. So never be an antagonist, all right? Never be an antagonist. And also, one of the things that's really important is that when you're on the sidelines of your sport, whether that's the side of a ski hill, that's the side of a rink or a field, or a gymnastic mat, when you're with other parents, if there is any negative talk about the coach, you've got to step away. You've got to stop being a gossip hound at that point and know that, you know what, that coach is there doing the best with what they know, right? We all do the best with what we know, right? And to know and not to do is not to know, right? So you could put a coach through some clinic, right, and say, do this, don't do that. But to know and not to do is not to know. But if you are a parent and you are amongst other parents and they are talking negatively about the coach, just step away. Like if you feel strongly enough to get that other parent who started the conversation and talk quietly to them and say, listen, there's better ways to go about this. What kind of troubles are you having? Right? And then, right, hey, this is the same thing. You go to coach. Hey, coach, why do you say that? You go to that parent and say, like, why are you saying that? Well, he's doing this or she's doing that. Great. What else? This, and that. All right. Here's the pathway. Remind them of the proper channels to fix that, right? First, have them go to the coach and get some time, right? If the coach can't give them the time or doesn't want to give them the time, there needs to be another outlet. And usually for a lot of you guys listening to me, there is, whether that's a team manager, an assistant coach, or an executive, like there's somebody else to talk to. Sometimes there's not, I get it. Sometimes, for some of my hockey guys, they run into problems and it's like, it's that's the only chain of command, right? So listen, dealing with difficult coaches is a two-way street. Okay. You have to bridge the gap, and ideally you do it from the very beginning. You lead with an olive branch, as they say, right? And you come, and you help your athlete do the same, right? To encourage them to sit down and maybe get them away, get them in a third party. They call Starbucks the third place for a reason. Get your coach out of their natural environment. Where you can have over a coffee, over a pizza. Hey, coach, listen, I'm excited about this opportunity to be on this team, to work with you. But listen, I want to know, what do you want from me? And how can I best work with you? How do you talk to kids? How do you, do you give, you can take this any number of ways, guys. I don't want to go too deep with it because every situation is different. But I encourage you to work with your athlete to step out. And I'm going to warn you. I had a meeting yesterday with the principal of a elite sports school up here in Canada, and it's interesting. Industry wide, all the principals they're all talking about how there's a lack of resiliency with our athletes, with just kids in general, but with athletes in particular, right? And so, and part of it is social media based, it's instant gratification based. But if we never give our kids the tools to be able to navigate it, then they're not going to succeed. And the things that usually derail an athlete are less about skill and ability and more about how they're dealing with the environment around them, how they're dealing with their coaches, how they're dealing with their teammates. And that all comes down to communication. So as a parent, if you suck at communication, right, you may have to upgrade your skills, right? So that you can, or to be able to help your athlete. This 48 Laws of Power book by Robert Greene, I highly recommend it. Also, another book I recommend, Ryan Halliday, Ego is the Enemy is another great one. Okay, I wish I had that one when I was really young. Okay, so listen, thanks for watching. I think we lost some of our people in our group. My phone looks like it may have died, but if you enjoyed this, do me a favor, share this with a coach, an athlete, a parent who needs to hear it. If I can help you and your athlete, and you want to help them become kind of mentally bulletproof with this, We've got some new parents on this call today, but if I can help you, then book a call, athletespecific.com/call. And, if we're a good fit for coaching, I'll be, we can, that might be something I offer up, but if not, we get a good 45 minutes to an hour on the phone and I can steer you in the right direction. So I hope you enjoyed this. Jorge, thank you. Appreciate it. Barbara V. Gates, Chris Coughlin out in Seattle, Agnes from Norway, holy smokes, Jeff from New York, Sue is in Switzerland, I think, Patience as well, Missy in Maryland or Pennsylvania, all the guys and girls out there, good to see all you guys. So good luck to all your athletes, and if I can help you, if you're on iTunes, check it out. We're going to post this on YouTube. Got a lot of good stuff happening this year, so thanks for watching, everybody. And if you got a question for me, Coach Edwards at athletespecific.com. See you soon. Ciao.